Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Nick, and this is the 90s Guy. Now, I want to start out with my, I guess you'd call it my reaction to the new Nintendo system that is releasing on March 3rd, 2017, which is on a Friday. Now, honestly, me being I guess you'd call it what they call now retro, old school gamer, I'm not really excited about this system. I have not really been excited about a Nintendo system since probably the Super Nintendo. The Super Nintendo to me was probably the last Nintendo system that I actually invested time and money in and actually had fun playing. The Nintendo Wii was a failure in my eyes. The Nintendo 64 was a hell of a system, but by the time it came around, I was playing PlayStation. And then PlayStation 2. Um, the system itself is going to sell a lot of units. Who are they targeting with this crowd? The Nintendo Wii and the Wii U, they basically targeted children, family party games, and that's pretty much what it was. The Wii U was subject to not having enough game titles within the first even couple months of it even being out. It literally took almost 4 years for them to actually come out with decent games that people would actually want to fork out the money to buy the system. Now, let me give you a little bit of a history lesson. In 1983, the Famicom system uh, was released, and it was shortly after the video game crash of 1983. So they were definitely not marketing it as a video game system. They called it a family computer. So, with the sales being huge, in 1985, they decided to release it as the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America. Now, this would go on to be a huge selling system for the company. The games would, definitely revolutionize the video game industry. You'd have classics like Mario Brothers, Mario 2, Mega Man, Castlevania, Final Fantasy, Punch Out, and then you'd also have some really good sports games like Tecmo Bowl. Some of my favorite games on the NES would have to be sort of, I wouldn't say rare titles, but titles you really don't hear about that much. Gunsmoke, Marble Madness, MTV Remote Control was also a very good game. Wheel of Fortune, Family Feud, sort of the oddball titles. And of course, some of the most sought after titles are Panic Restaurant, Little Samson, Chubby Cherub, then of course the Nintendo World Championship carts. The Legend of Zelda was an awesome game. I mean, on any system. But on the Nintendo Entertainment System, that game was just amazing. It was really cool to have a cartridge that was, it basically was a gold cartridge. It had a nice shiny gold coating on it. Very unique. Golden Axe was also a very good game. But basically what I'm trying to get, my point across with this is I grew up with this system. I have very fond memories of playing the system, getting the games at KB Toys, Toys R Us, some of the other games that were definitely really good in my opinion. Hogan's Alley, Ice Climber, Excite Bike, Gyromite, Stack Up, Wild Gunman, Clue Clue Land, Baseball, Duck Hunt. The list goes on of fantastic games for the system. And then came around the Super Nintendo. Now, I looked at articles about the Super Nintendo and Nintendo Power, and I was just floored on the system itself. It was very different looking, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, Nintendo is going to top the NES. How is this even possible? And in 1991, in North America, the Super Nintendo, also known as the Super Famicom in Japan, was released. Um, Super Mario World, I can't even begin to tell you how awesome that game was. I still have the system itself that I had from when I was younger. And some of the games were Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario Kart, Street Fighter 2, Sunset Riders was also a really good game. The Madden games were good on the system. Trying to think of some other really good ones. Boogerman, Beavis and Butthead, Wayne's World. Some of these games were very frustrating, but they were really good. Um, Trying to think of some other games on the system that I have. NBA Jam. Uh, Shaq Fu was a horrible game on any system, but the Super Nintendo was a 16-bit console. So the graphics were better, the sound chip was way better over the 8-bit NES. But this system was revolutionary for the time. It was going against the Sega Genesis, which was also a 16-bit system. They, I remember the campaign that Sega ran. Sega does what Nintendo don't. And the Sega console, the Sega Genesis, was the predecessor to the Sega Master System, and it basically was marketed towards adults and a little bit, I'd probably say mid-teens. Very games were different that came out on the system. They were more edgy, gritty, darker, more mature games. The Mortal Kombat games included the blood in it as opposed to the Super Nintendo, because even at this time, Nintendo was very family friendly. Capcom, Konami, Tecmo, Square Enix were companies that were part of the Nintendo library. And it was good because they had key third-party developers for the system. Now, the system itself was very different. It was still gray, but they added some purple to it. Instead of the inserting the cartridge through the side, it was a top loader, which definitely improved on the design. You didn't really have a whole huge problem with the games not working anymore. But the system itself was just, I couldn't even believe the reception that it got, and definitely in our household, I remember playing the system and still do. Like I said, I still have the system. Super Bowling was also a really good one that I have. But basically, what I'm trying to get at is after this, when the Nintendo 64 came out, I wasn't, I don't know why, but after the Super Nintendo, I went to PlayStation. To me, it was the future of gaming, CD-based games, and the Nintendo 64 was still using cartridges. There really wasn't any game on the 64 that I really wanted, because the PlayStation had games like Metal Gear Solid, Siphon Filter, Crash Bandicoot. The wrestling games were better. The graphics were better. The sound was better. I have to give the Nintendo 64 its props for some really awesome games like GoldenEye and Mario Kart, The Legend of Zelda, games on that system, Ocarina of Time, Donkey Kong 64. There's a huge list of games on the system that were just really awesome. And then it went on to the GameCube. I did not have a GameCube. I still do not have a GameCube. By industry standards, the GameCube was considered to be a failure. An underrated system, but a failure. The Wii sold many systems due to the fact that it was targeted towards children. party games, the motion sensor, that was the big selling point. And now in 2017, you have the Nintendo Switch. Because the Wii U, I mean, let's face it, the system failed. Let's just throw that out there. The system failed. Very expensive, not worth buying in my opinion. But the Nintendo Switch is very highly anticipated. You've seen the reviews, you've seen the pictures and the videos, you've seen some of the games that are being released. Just Dance, the new Mario game, the Zelda game. But all in all, there's not a whole lot of games on launch day, let alone launch titles. So once again, Nintendo is making a huge mistake on not having a huge, at least a good chunk of games that are ready to go for this system. Besides, like I said, since the Super Nintendo, Nintendo has not made me excited to go out and get their system. They have not made me excited to go and buy their games and spend the money. They have not done that. The advertising has not done that. The actual proof of what the system looks like has not done this. So in order for them to get, and I'm hugely biased because of the fact that I was born in '85. I lived in the late '80s and the '90s, and of course 2000s. So I grew up in a whole different generation of video gaming. So there are people who are interested in the system for many different reasons, and I don't fault them for this. But I honestly can say that I probably will not be buying another Nintendo system ever. Besides the NES Classic, which I can't get my hands on because they're still selling for like $150, $200. Thanks a lot, scalpers. But anyways, thank you for listening. Leave a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button down below, and keep on gaming.